G'day everyone, welcome to this edition of DURKO's Notebook for the 2023 Australian Grand Prix. Got a ton of stuff I want to talk about, and I really saw red on race day. Pull up a pew, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. You wouldn't fucking read about it. So we can return to Albert Park for the Australian Grand Prix. Now, in itself, Albert Park is different in the sense it doesn't feel like you're at a Grand Prix circuit that is made of actual street circuits used by the general public for about 33 weeks of the year. It's got the feeling that it's actually a fixed circuit in so many ways because of the amount of infrastructure they pump into the place to make it into the venue that it is. For the race weekend, I was there live with a shitload of other group members and especially Tony, Ben and Sophie, who travelled all the way from the other side of the planet to come and visit and experience their first ever Australian Grand Prix. So it was a great time to catch up with them and meet them in person. For the start, now I'll talk obviously about qualifying Perez's little stuff up. George Russell had an amazing start straight off the line. And again, I think it's another example where he's got into Lewis Hamilton's head and is screwing with him. The first corner, or first car, we got down to the opening lap at least. Now, Stroll got no penalty for punting Leclerc off. Now, I think that's absolute bullshit as to why Stroll yet again gets away with another incident that was deemed a racing incident when he clearly punted off Leclerc, finishing his race when he was stuck at the kitty litter within the first lap. And I think, as I said, it's just an absolute joke that this bloke keeps getting away with no penalties, while other drivers are penalised for infringements or incidents that coming together with another driver that compared to that are just complete nonce. I think Stroll's, I mean, could you say protected by daddy because he owns a team? I don't know. I just think it's, as I said, I think it's bullshit that Stroll's getting away with this stuff and he's not being penalised for ruining another driver's race, and for the Ferrari team to just have half their chances of getting any points sidelined within minutes of the start is just absolute shit. Rubbish. Just a joke. Albon's bit of an off there at turn 7. That turned out to be, as James Vowell said, a bit of a setup fault, not getting the car quite right, because you're going between quality and the race, they do change the setup of the car to some degree, or so that's what JV said. That brought out a red flag incident, which I think was a complete joke within itself. There was 3 red flags all weekend, and this was the first one of them I think was bloody stupid. Why the hell did they have to have a red flag for that? I don't know. You're taking the cars around behind Bernd Motorlander and the safety car. They're touring around. It gives the flaggies and all the track marshals there a chance to get out and clear the track. They can recover Albon's car under the tractor safely, and for what it's worth, I just think to red flag that, it was just stupid. There was no damage to the barrier. It was just a complete waste of time, and it just shows how stupid the rule book is when they're hitting the panic button for such an incident as that. So we went on through the race. Ocon, he gave the Liberace treatment again to De Vries at turn 3, punted him up in the air. And I don't know how De Vries got away with it. He just kept going. He just bounced the car up and kept going. George Russell, he then went out on fire. He was going up the main straight and had to bin it because the car was on fire. And obviously it was the power unit. He said the PU had gone. But as my son Sammy said, the way we were watching the Mercs, they were completely different to what we've seen on television the first 2 races. Now, Sammy reckons that the Merc had potentially turned up with a completely new car and just haven't told anyone, denying any upgrades. But that car was a completely different pig to what we saw in the first 2 races. So, yeah, George Russell's out with the PU, so obviously they've got some reliability issues there they may need to look at. Towards the end of the race, obviously K-Mag went into turn 2 and detonated the car by smashing into the wall, rearing off his right rear tyre. This again brought out a red flag. Now the stupid thing is K-Mag was able to continue on and get the car to a safe position where they could recover it, obviously under a safety car again, or a VSC if you wanted to. But for some reason, they've got the red flag out again. Why, I don't know. Another stupid example of why the red flag was brought out. Just beyond me. We then get to the restart. Now, talking about the restart, obviously there was one for Albon. They brought it back, restart. Yep, okay, full grid, go. I think if you go to the last 5 laps or 10% of distance for the whole race, it should be a rolling start, because by the end of the race, it's just chewing up time, wasting time, doing a standing start again for one single lap of the race. It is just a joke. Do a rolling start, get the safety car, he can peer into the pit lane, and then whoever's got the lead can just lead them to the start-finish line, and then you're on. The rolling start's my preference rather than this stupid red flag full grid start again bullshit that they went on with. I think it's starting to ruin it, and as I said, the rule book's just become a joke, just a book of fiction now. You can't even believe anything that's in it. So we get to the third start after the third red flag. The second one, sorry. And Sainz has, I call it a racing incident compared to what Stroll did to Leclerc. He's bumped Alonso. Alonso's gone for a spin, kept going. No damage to Alonso's car. But why Sainz was given a 5-second time penalty is beyond me, because I deemed it as a racing incident under what would be considered the race start protocol. Usually everything on the first lap is considered a racing incident. Obviously, the Stroll's matter is completely different, in my opinion. But why Sainz got a 5-second penalty, I don't know. And obviously the Ferrari team have appealed it, and I think good on them for doing that. They've got to stand the moral ground of what the bullshit rule was for him copping that penalty. So we get to the next start. Obviously, Gasly, he's just had a complete brain fart. And, well, his argument was he didn't see Ocon coming, but he's ruined the race for the whole Alpine team and parked both cars into the fence. So I don't know why Gasly's not closer to getting a one-race ban. Well, we could see Jack Doohan parachuted into that seat for one race. But I don't think Otmar Zafnauer is going to be too happy with what Gasly did to take himself and Ocon out. How he didn't see him, I don't know. He should have looked in the mirrors. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he did. He just couldn't see. But I don't know how you can't miss your teammate when he's right on your rear wheel like that. It's just beyond me. Now, one thing I just want to clarify is I think all weekend, while I was there, especially standing between turn 5 and 6 on Friday for free practice 2, and as I stood around the circuit in various places for FP1, Quali, FP3, the Ferrari SF23 is the most beautiful sounding and the most magical car to watch go past you at speed. And as I stood there for free practice 2 with Tony and Lee and my son Sammy and a few others, we stood about halfway between turn 5 and 6, and to watch that car come into turn 5, absolutely nailed the road, it was just like a thing of beauty. And to watch it just scream past, it is just the most amazing car to see in real life. So I'm just going to go now to a one-off segment I'm calling Big T's Tech Corner. And this is some ideas floated by Tony Dunn over the course of the race weekend, and it's quite an interesting theory that he's come up with. Tony's idea is that Red Bull could be running through Honda some cold engine mapping. So basically, this refers to when the car's coming off throttle into a corner, they're potentially coasting, braking, there's no acceleration, the fuel and the ignition is cut off to the engine, like a stop-start you see in most modern cars when they stop at a red light. So this saves on fuel, saves on wearing out the combustion components of the car, the spark plugs, so forth. So then that energy is retained back into the car, and so for that split second they're running less fuel. Now that could mean that this speed advantage, overall gain that we're seeing in the Red Bulls is down to them running a lower fuel weight in terms of the amount of kilos of fuel they've got on board. Now, I've got to give credit to Tony for that theory because he's put a lot of thought into it, and I think it's got some credibility to it as to what's happening, because the Red Bull, when it was coming in under the brakes, did sound different to any other car as it would come into a corner. Now, Scarbs on Twitter has, of course, questioned the drivetrain being the reliability factor or item in question for Red Bull. It's going to be scrutinised by them, but it could be their Achilles heel, so to speak, is the drivetrain. Now, you've got to think back to when Perez was in qualifying and he had that brake issue. Does this come back to this cold engine mapping idea of the engine being shut off effectively for those few seconds while they're braking? And was it something to do with Perez's brake failure, that he had no hydraulics all of a sudden, that his brakes didn't hold him into that corner where he went off and resulted in him getting P20, obviously. Now, they redid the brakes and a lot of work to Chico's car prior to the race because he started from pit lane, obviously. So Parc Fermé's excluded for him. So it's an idea that Tony has floated, and I've got to say, I give it merit. From what I saw and heard, race or over the course of the weekend, seeing the RBR go round, it's a different beast to all the other cars. The most shit sounding car out there was, of course, the Mercedes. That W14 just sounded so strange to every other car that went past. Don't know why, but just sounded weird. So there, that's Tony's idea on the Red Bull, and that's something that may be discussed in the future, and it may be something that comes to light at some stage. Is it legal? Can't see any reason why not. Maybe it's just a theory, because, I mean, all they're doing is shutting down the fuel and the ignition. There's probably nothing in the rule books to say you can't not do that and then start it again. And it could be a compression restart when the accelerator's applied. Just a thought. So that's it for this edition of DURKO's Notebook. One thing I just do want to quickly give credit to is this photo that Tony Dunn found of the difference in the two floors between the Red Bull and the Aston Martin. It's amazing to see the comparison, especially the airflow effect underneath those two different floors. Huge difference in what has been described as a green Red Bull. Well, you look under the floor and see it's a completely different dance floor that both teams are running. The one thing I want to also do is give credit to the Hulk for his efforts in that RC. I think he's turned up with his passion again to drive, obviously, and he's given K-Mag a fair tune-up at this stage, especially so far he's outperforming him, I think, and I think he's found a really good home there at Haas. So well done to the Hulk for turning that team's fortune around, so to speak. Yeah, so as I said, that's it for this edition of DURKO's Notebook. I will be back in a couple of weeks' time with a bit of a break. We were meant to have the Chinese Grand Prix, of course, but we're going to wait for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix from Baku. And as usual, you know what I'm like. I'm not looking forward to that race because I can't stand it. Anyway, that's it, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks' time. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.